Frančkom sva se sričala, prav milo se spogledala, solzne so bile najne oči, vse to ljubezenstri. Solzne so bile najne oči, vse to ljubezenstri. Kjerkoli sem hodil, kjer sem bil, pa take nisem še dobil. Na blato belka ličeca, pa srca usmiljenga. Na blato belka ličeca, pa srca usmiljenga. Škrjanček poje, žvrgoli, se belega dneva veseli. Škrjanček poje, beli dan, pozdravlja hrib in plan. Škrjanček poje, beli dan, pozdravlja hrib in plan.
Dear teachers and fellow students, I'm very pleased today to present to you His Excellency Mr. Patrick Kelly, the Ambassador of the Republic of Ireland to Slovenia, from one green country to another. This is his first time he's been to our school, and so I'm very honored to say, Kid Milefoce. I'm sure we're all excited to hear from him, and we're all excited to ask questions. So I won't hog the spotlight anymore, and I'll kindly invite him to say a few words and to allow us to have some fun all together, and more importantly, to learn about Ireland.
Thank you. Dobro jutro. Good morning to you all. I'm delighted to be here in Celju this morning, and in this very historic school, which I know is one of the oldest and most respected schools in Slovenia. Can I also say a warm word of thanks to the lovely performance there by the choir that we just heard, and appreciated very much the rendition of Danny Boy, which is a very well-known Irish song. And I also noted that one or two members of the choir were wearing green, which I'm sure was probably no coincidence that they wore green on this particular day, but I thought they were wonderful. I'm sure that's my vote. Maybe just keep it a bit away from my mouth. Can you hear me all okay? I've been ambassador here in Slovenia for just 5 months now. Myself and my family arrived last December, and we're a small embassy in Ljubljana, just myself and one other colleague. We also cover Bosnia and Herzegovina. I'm the Irish ambassador to Bosnia also. And certainly since we've arrived, we've been struck by the many similarities that exist between Ireland and Slovenia, and also by the very warm relations which exist between Irish people and Slovenians, the natural affinity which exists between the two countries. Okay, hope that's a bit better. I've just prepared a small or a short statement because I know you've all been studying environmental issues, so I just wanted to address that and say a few words about the issue of climate change, but just more generally about attitudes in Ireland towards the environment and towards how we can take steps to protect it better. Ireland and Slovenia are both small European countries blessed with immense natural beauty. I know how much Slovenians enjoy and take pride in the great outdoors which you possess here. That is a love which Irish people also share, though we're probably not as blessed with as good or as diverse a climate as you have. Our climate is what is called temperate, which usually translates into a lot of rain throughout the year and hardly any snow or extreme heat for that matter. So I'm afraid we have no equivalent of Tina Maze in Ireland. Skiing is a bit of an unknown quantity for Irish people. I've been invited here today to speak to you on the topic of climate change and the environment, and I know it's a subject that you've been studying very closely. So I won't spend too much time on the details of the current climate change negotiations which are taking place, or Ireland's position on these. You all know how great a challenge climate change represents and how important this year is for hopefully reaching a new international agreement in Paris on how to... Now, as I said, I thought it might be better today just to sort of say a few words about attitudes in Ireland towards the environment and what steps we are taking nationally and at an international level to help protect the environment. Ireland, of course, fully recognises that climate change is one of the great global challenges of this century. Promoting effective action at both national and international level to tackle climate change represents one of the major priorities in our domestic and foreign policy. For many people, and particularly it has to be said for young people, climate change is not just an important issue, but the issue which is likely to define the kind of world they and their children will grow up in. Like many other countries in Europe, Ireland actually has a specific political party dedicated to campaigning primarily on the need to protect the environment, the Green Party. And in fact, this party formed part of our government during the years 2007 and 2011, and helped to promote a number of initiatives at that time to protect the environment, which I'll mention later. The United Nations also has a central role to play in tackling climate change. Ireland is proud of the fact that the current Special Envoy for Climate Change appointed by the UN Secretary General is an Irish woman, Mary Robinson, who was appointed to that position last July. Mary Robinson served as President of Ireland between 1990 and 1997 and was the first woman to be elected as our President. Green, of course, is the colour most commonly associated now with protecting the environment, and it is also, of course, a colour strongly associated with Ireland. In fact, it is our national colour along with white and orange, and all our national sports teams proudly wear green, as I know do most Slovenia also, so that's something we have in common. In Ireland, we very much like to see ourselves as a green island. Protecting the wonderful natural environment we have is increasingly very much a part of our identity. We are blessed with wonderful countryside, and for us, as for Slovenia, agriculture is a very important part of our economy. Now this, as it happens, presents us with something of a difficulty as regards climate change, because we have a very strong beef and dairy sector, and literally have hundreds of thousands of cattle grazing in open fields for most of the year. These cattle, unfortunately, make a major contribution to our greenhouse emissions. However, we recognise that along with all our EU partners, we have to make major reductions in these emissions and meet certain specified international targets by 2030. We are committed to doing this through offsetting action in other sectors, but we also believe it's important for the agricultural sector in Ireland and in other EU countries to be factored in to determine the overall emission targets that we agree to as part of international agreements. The agricultural sector in Ireland is adapting to the challenges, with major emphasis being placed on new, more sustainable methods of production. Food and drink exports are hugely important to Ireland, and we take particular pride in the quality of our beef, lamb, fish and dairy products. We are now consciously marketing Ireland as a producer of sustainable and environmentally friendly food and drink produce. Protecting the environment can be done in countless numbers of ways. One simple measure, which our government introduced a number of years ago, was to impose a tax or a levy on plastic bags, which people get when they buy goods in the supermarket. This simple step led to incredible results, with over a reduction of over 90% in the number of plastic bags made available by supermarkets to customers. It probably was the fact that people didn't like the idea of having to pay 15 cents for every plastic bag that they were given by the supermarket when they bought their shopping. However, perhaps also a very simple way of getting people to think more about the environment and how they can individually help to protect it. Nowadays, pretty much everyone in Ireland uses or brings reusable bags when they go to the supermarket to shop, so that very few people would need to buy a plastic bag when you do so. Another innovation we've tried in Ireland is a scheme where you get tax relief for purchasing a bike and then using it to get to work. This scheme has already proved quite popular and has contributed to a very large increase in the number of people cycling to work rather than driving in recent years. We also have free bikes for hire schemes of the kind which operates in Ljubljana, and schemes like this now operate in all the major Irish cities, having been successfully pioneered in Dublin some years ago. The overall thrust of government efforts in Ireland as regards transport is trying to make public transport and more environmentally friendly forms of transport more popular than having people use their motor car. Education is obviously hugely important in promoting environmental awareness. Environmental studies don't form part of the curriculum in Irish schools as such. However, what we have instead is what's called the Green Schools programme, which promotes old school action for the environment and aims to instill a strong sense of environmental responsibility in students that also spreads beyond the classroom into students' homes and into the wider community. Approximately 90% of all schools in Ireland, both primary and secondary, participate in this programme. And to date, over 2,700 schools have been awarded the Green Flag for meeting the goals of the programme. And indeed, I can recall how proud and excited my two young sons were when their school was awarded the Green Flag last year. So it's a very good way of getting, especially young children, to be conscious of the environment. There is also an initiative whereby, as part of the Green School programme, whereby pupils and parents are required to, 1 day per month, to either cycle or walk or take more environmentally friendly forms of transport to school rather than using the motor car. So that's another initiative that's been taken in the education area. Much of environmental action is aimed at reducing overdependence on fossil fuels. Ireland is very heavily dependent on natural gas supplies, much of it from our neighbour in Britain, and on imported oil to meet our energy needs. However, the government is also now making active efforts to explore and promote the use of alternative, renewable energy sources. In particular, we're exploiting our status as a small, windswept island in the North Atlantic to promote the use of wind and wave power. And there are now very many wind farms in Ireland, which, if you ever have a chance to visit, will become very evident. But it's proving an effective way of coming up with a new renewable source of energy. For many EU countries, nuclear energy is an important source of their energy, including here in Slovenia. However, in Ireland, there's always been very strong opposition to the use of nuclear energy, perhaps for concerns that somehow nuclear energy is not a very safe form of energy. When you see accidents such as happened in Chernobyl or more recently in Japan. There's also generally very strong opposition in Ireland to the use of, or the fact that countries have nuclear weapons. And you may not be aware, but Ireland has played a very leading role internationally in trying to stop and ban the use of nuclear weapons. And in fact, we were the first country to propose and to sign what's now called the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, which is basically the basis for international action aimed at removing the threat posed by nuclear weapons. Tourism is also a very important sector for Ireland and for our economy. We had over 7 million people visit Ireland last year, most of them to holiday. Again, we are making conscious efforts to promote Ireland as an alternative and environmentally friendly tourist destination. We're not a sunshine destination, so if you want a sunshine holiday and to relax on the beach, then you still need to go to the Mediterranean or here to the Adriatic, such as you have here in Slovenia. But if you want maybe a different kind of holiday, sort of involving outdoor activities, cycling, hiking, swimming, sailing, golf, then Ireland is probably a very good place to look at. And as long as you don't mind a bit of rain, then hopefully Ireland might have something to offer you. Just one final thing I want to touch upon is the link between climate change and development, and how Ireland uses its international aid programme to tackle climate change. The focus of our aid efforts to date has always been on sub-Saharan Africa and assisting the poorest, least developed countries, which are precisely the ones most affected by climate change and least able to cope with its challenges. There's also a huge emphasis in our aid programme on tackling hunger and promoting basic agriculture as the best means of sustainability for impoverished rural communities. The Irish aid programme actively works to tackle problems such as drought and to reduce the incidence of severe weather and climatic events which have such a devastating impact on the poorest communities and those least equipped to deal with climate change and environmental disasters. Internationally, we're committed to providing funding every year to help deal with the problems caused by climate change, and this amounts to some 34 million euros each year. And we use this primarily or largely to assist developing countries tackle the problem of climate change. And we use this in a number of ways. One obvious way is that we would actually pay for delegations from the least developed countries, the poorest countries, to attend all these major international conferences which take place on climate change, because it's important for those countries to be represented and to have a voice at the table. So this is one way we sort of work to help these countries tackle the problem of climate change. I hope I've given you some flavour of our perspective on climate change and the efforts we're making nationally to protect the environment. So again, I would just like to thank you very much for inviting me here today. Obviously, I'll be more than happy to respond to any questions you have on climate change or just more generally on Ireland. Bye-bye.
Thank you for your speech. Mr. Ambassador, I invite you to the stage with our students Jan and Sara to have you're going to get asked some questions about the environment.
So you have answered most of our questions already in your speech, so I would like to start first. I had a question regarding the alternative energies. So you answered that, you mentioned that the Irish support such energies, and nuclear energy is not a major part of your energetic plans. So I would focus on different things because you've mentioned most of the ecological things in your speech. So do you think that the European Union is a successful formation? It has been for many years now, and I believe that the European Union is not as strong as it should be. The countries are still quite independent, and in a way that is good because the countries and people remain independent, and their culture is important for them. But in today the global political situation is slightly demanding because, and I think that the European Union should be more integrated, and the countries should cooperate in a bigger deal. What do you think about that?
Well, it's a very good question. It's very it's an issue which I think for many people it's really boils down to what is the future of the European Union. Obviously, the European Union has been in existence now for some 60 odd years, and we have progressed to a stage where there is quite a large amount of I suppose we would call sharing of sovereignty and responsibility. But some people would say that we have to go further, and that's what you're suggesting in your question, that we have to have greater integration, we have to perhaps move to having, because we now have a common currency, and perhaps we should have a common budget. So it is a very topical issue. I mean, I think in Ireland at the moment we don't have any strong views. We wouldn't sort of certainly feel that we need now to move necessarily towards integration, greater integration. It's something that perhaps will need to be considered in the near future, or maybe the medium term. But for the moment, we feel in Ireland that the priority has to be, in a way, consolidating where we are, because I think the real challenge for Europe at the moment is the economy. It's all about creating greater employment, particularly for young people, and promoting economic growth. Given the mood that exists in Europe now, the fact that people are perhaps maybe sort of more questioning about the EU and its value, we feel that it probably is not the time to think about maybe moving on to the next stage of closer integration. But it's something which I think, in the decades to come, I think will have to be addressed. But for the moment, we think very much the priority has to be on, as I say, consolidation, and be focusing on using the instruments that we have now to promote greater economic opportunities for all Europeans.
Thank you. You've mentioned economic growth, with Ireland being one of the fastest evolving countries in the European Union. What would you say is more of a priority for the Irish government? Maintaining that high economic growth, or protecting the environment and solving environmental problems?
Well, thank you. Again, very, very good question. I think for Ireland, and probably for most countries, they'll be feeling that both these issues have to be priorities. It'll be difficult to kind of rank them in terms of importance. I think any government in Europe, the economy has to be a major issue, because that's what people expect when people elect governments to improve the overall living standards of the citizens and to bring about greater economic opportunities. So for any government, they have to give most of their attention to promoting economic growth. But the environment and climate change is an issue which also cannot be ignored or not given a high importance, because if we want to promote greater economic growth, then in a way we have to sort of look at climate change, and we have to try and promote growth which is more sustainable and which kind of protects our environment, because if we keep on doing what we've been doing for many years now, then it's only going to make the problem of climate change worse. So I would say that both issues have to be very much a priority. I wouldn't like to sort of say that one is more important than the other, but they both need to be addressed. Okay.
You mentioned before in the speech that the Green Party in Ireland has been elected in 2007 and was a part of the parliament to 2011. What about now? Is it still part of the political situation?
Well, yeah, the Green Party is still very much in existence now. As I said, they were in government for 4 years up to 2011, and then there was an election at that stage, and because by that stage the economic situation had improved or had worsened very much, the government that was in office then was voted out of power, and the Green Party suffered as a result of that. They had 6 members of the parliament, but they lost all their seats. So now basically they're in a situation where they're trying to rebuild, and there will be an election in Ireland sometime in the next year or so. So we will see how we do. It was, I suppose in a way, it was just unfortunate that they were in office at a time when the economy really suffered, and in a way they paid the price for being part of the government at that stage. But there is still support for them. They still get about 2 or 3% according to the European polls. So we'll see how they do when the election takes place next year.
Now, while we're at politics, how does Northern Ireland, being a part of Britain, UK, influence politics in the rest of Ireland? For example, now that there were elections and the Labour Party lost terribly, how is the political situation in the rest of the island? Is similar, or what are the differences?
Yes, well, I mean, we refer to Ireland because Ireland is such as 32 counties, but obviously part of that island is part of the United Kingdom. But there is a peace agreement governing the relations between Ireland and the UK. I'm sure many of you know that for many years there was conflict in Northern Ireland for over 30 years, very difficult and sad conflict. But thankfully there is now a peace agreement which is working well. So there are very good relations between Ireland and between Northern Ireland and between Ireland and the UK. So it's very much a case of a successful peace agreement, which is helping to bring peace and to improve the situation of all the people in Ireland. There have been elections in Britain recently, but the government that was there, or certainly a major part of that government, has been re-elected. So there are very good relations between Ireland and Britain now. Because of Northern Ireland, there were strains in our relations, there were difficulties, but the peace agreement has hopefully put those to an end, and we've entered a new era of cooperation, and that's been signified recently by the fact that Queen Elizabeth, the head of state in Britain, visited Ireland in 2011, and it was a very historic visit, even though she's been the Queen in Britain for some 60 years now, over 60 years. It was our first time to ever visit the southern part of Ireland as such, because basically before that it just politically wasn't possible for her to have visited. But that visit took place, it was a great success, and since then our own president has returned the state visit to Britain. So the relations now are very, very good, and this peace agreement has provided a framework for greater cooperation between the two parts of Ireland. So that is also helping to promote better relations throughout the island.
Since we're all in the European Union, it's supposed to be easier for us to go study abroad. So is Ireland eager to welcome students who come from elsewhere and wish to study in Ireland? Are there any programs for students for foreigners? Also, how high are the tuition fees, and where do students stay during their time at university? And which universities are the most famous, and which are, if any, known for being accepting and welcoming towards foreign students?
That's a very practical question, given that I'm sure many of you will be thinking about going to university in the next year or two. No, in terms of, because we're both members of the European Union, there is a basic right for any EU citizen to travel throughout the Union and to undertake third level studies, university studies. So that very much extends to people here in Slovenia. There is a couple of websites, and I can give the information maybe to or to your professors exactly, they can circulate a couple of very good websites which give information about studying in Ireland. But basically, yes, you could apply to go to study in Ireland. There is a specific website that you would have to go to do that. But certainly a lot of overseas students go to study in Ireland. I think the latest figure I saw was something in the region of 35,000 students from outside Ireland study in Ireland. And from 161 countries, so it's a very large number of countries. And all the major universities will be very receptive of students coming from within the other EU countries. The websites that I mentioned will give you information about fees. I mean, basically, there are no tuition fees as such, but there is what's called a capitation grant, which certainly students in Ireland have to pay when they go to university. And I think that will probably also apply to any other EU national studying at a university in Ireland. I think it's somewhere in the region of €3,000 or €4,000. I'm not sure the precise details, but the website that I mentioned will give you greater information on that. There are a large number of universities in Ireland. The most famous would be in Dublin would be Trinity College, which is based in the centre of the city, and it's one of the oldest universities anywhere in Europe. It's I think well over 500 years old. And then also University College Dublin, which I attended, is the other major university in Dublin. But there's about 3 or 4 universities in Dublin, and also in the other major cities. As I say, the normal arrangement in most universities is that accommodation is provided for first-year students, for first-year undergraduates. But then after that, you have to make your own arrangements. So I think that would be the arrangements that would apply if you did go to study in Ireland. But no, there will be very warm welcome, and certainly Ireland is keen to have people from other EU countries come to study in Ireland. So I'll pass on that information to your professors so that you can examine it.
Now, if you decide to stay after you get your PhD, how easy or difficult would it be to get a job in Ireland? And in what fields? For example, computer industry.
Yes, well, I mean, like Slovenia, Ireland has been through some difficult times, economic times recently, and we also had a major recession following the economic crash in 2008. A very, very painful period for many Irish people. So unemployment did increase a great deal, but now thankfully it's beginning to reduce. The unemployment rate at the moment is around 10%, which I think is kind of quite similar to Slovenia. But in terms of opportunities, well, certainly yes, for university graduates, there will be certainly quite a few opportunities in areas like IT. You may not be aware, but Ireland has 8 of the 10 largest global IT companies are actually based in Ireland. So the companies like Google, Facebook, they all have their international headquarters based in Dublin. So there will be a lot of opportunities in those areas for computer science graduates to get jobs. And there will be also demand for people with language skills to work in Ireland. But as I say, the unemployment rate is similar to Slovenia, so I can't say that there's unlimited opportunities, but certainly I think if you study in the right areas, such as science or computer studies, then I think there may well be opportunities to work in Ireland.
Are there a lot of electric cars in Ireland? I mean, in Slovenia we've seen some of the stations where you can fuel your car by electricity, but I haven't seen many on the road. How about in Ireland?
Well, in terms of electric cars, well, again, it's there are some, but not too many. I mean, I think I know that there was a pilot scheme in Dublin last year, which is the capital, where they set up a number of stations where you could recharge your car. But I mean, it's still very much a very small number of people using electrical vehicles. But I'm sure it's something which, provided they can kind of make it more, I suppose, economical for people to have electric cars, and they can address the issue of how making it easier for you to use a car and to recharge it when necessary, then I'm sure we will see more electrical cars on the road. But I think we're probably at a similar level of development to Slovenia as regards the use of electric cars so far.
Now, do you believe that politicians should be able to decide whether an environmental problem is real or not? For example, if we take global warming, you know that 97% of scientists agree that global warming is a real problem and that humans are at least partially responsible for it. And yet there are quite a few politicians who disagree and claim that even though they have no scientific evidence, that it is just a fraud to make some corporations even richer.
No, that's a very good question. No, I think, I mean, certainly in Ireland there's a very wide acceptance of the threat which climate change poses to us all. So I don't think there are too many politicians in Ireland who kind of question the existence of climate change or sort of try to dismiss it. I mean, I think that's, from what I can see, and even in Europe, I think there's very much a very large measure of consensus that climate change is a real problem. It's probably largely, I think, in the United States where you have politicians who kind of continue to question whether we should take climate change all that seriously. I mean, I think the reality is that most people, certainly in Ireland, I mean, our climate is changing. It's becoming milder. I said before that we don't get too much snow, but I mean, snow is becoming more and more rare in Ireland. I think the last heavy snow we had in Ireland was about 5 years ago. It's certainly getting warmer. Temperature is creeping up, and we're having phenomena such as more flooding. I know there's been some heavy flooding here in Celju in the past year or two, and similarly in Ireland, a number of our cities have had major incidents of flooding. So I think generally the public and certainly most politicians, not only all politicians, realise that this is a real phenomenon and it's going to change the world that we live in, and it needs to be addressed. So I don't think we have too many doubters in Ireland that climate change is something we have to deal with.
St. Patrick's Day being less than 2 months ago, did you celebrate it, and how do the Irish traditionally celebrate it?
Well, yes, St. Patrick's Day is a very important event for all Irish people. I was delighted to be here for my first St. Patrick's Day in Slovenia, and certainly I think it was a great success. We had we were actually delighted to have a major concert in Ljubljana just before St. Patrick's Day, featuring local musicians and local dancers who were playing Irish music and performing Irish dancing, and it's really very gratifying to see how much interest there is in Irish culture here in Celju. We had a full audience, 500 people for the concert, so that was a great success. And we were also delighted that Slovenia and Ljubljana took part in what we call the global greening initiative that we have in Ireland. Obviously, people are aware about St. Patrick's Day being the National Day of Ireland, and there are very many Irish people or people with Irish heritage around the world. I mean, we estimate somewhere in the region of 70 million people can claim some degree of Irish ancestry, 45 million of whom live in the United States. So many people like to join us in celebrating St. Patrick's Day, and that was the case here in Slovenia with the concert. And we also had Ljubljana Castle lit up for for a couple of days. Tomorrow St. Patrick's Day and Philharmonic Hall in Ljubljana. So it's just a way of I think, sort of trying to underlie the strong links that exist between Ireland and other countries around the world. So we were really delighted that Slovenia took part in that initiative. In Ireland itself, obviously, the day is marked by major parades. It's in a way, it's a bit like Carnival that you might have in parts of Europe. There's a huge, big parade in Dublin, 500,000 people will attend, and it's just a chance for people to celebrate being Irish. And so we're always delighted though to celebrate St. Patrick's Day with our friends around the world. So I'm really delighted that Slovenia has also very much taken St. Patrick's Day to its heart and is taking part fully in all our celebrations.
Thank you for all your answers. I think that would be everything from us. And
So, if anyone else has a question that they would like Mr. Ambassador to answer, please.
Yes, I have a question. Mr. Ambassador, welcome to the first grammar school in Celju. My name is Philip, and my question is, in which aspects do you think Slovenia and Ireland are similar? Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Philip. Well, I suppose the obvious similarity that we're both fairly small countries. I think 2 million people here in Slovenia, and Ireland is just over. Well, the total island is 6 million people, but in the part of Ireland that I represent, it's about 4.5 million people. So we're both small countries, and to some extent, we certainly have a lot of common in terms of the EU. I think Ireland actually is very proud of the fact that it was during the Irish presidency of the European Union in 2004 that Slovenia joined the European Union. I think we're both countries which possess beautiful natural scenery and countryside. I think certainly the experience of many Irish people who travel here is very positive, so I think it would be good if we could promote more travel between the two countries, and that's something that we're hoping to work on during my time here in Slovenia. But I think it's, we're both very proud of our countries. We have similar experiences in terms of historically. I mean, Ireland was living very much under the shadow of our large neighbour, Britain, for many years, and I think Slovenia has a similar experience in terms of its historical past. And as I say, I think there's just a natural affinity between the two peoples, even though we are quite far apart in terms of where we are in Europe. But I think we both have a similar outlook on the world. So I think there's a great deal in common and much to build on. So that's something I certainly hope to advance while I'm ambassador here in Slovenia.
Any other questions?
No questions. And
Answer to all your questions. No one's going to ask me about you too.
I have a question. So you said you've seen that Slovenia has a lot of beautiful natural sites. Have you been to any of them? What's the best natural site in Slovenia, in your opinion?
Yeah, well, we've just been here for about 5 months, but we've had a chance to travel around, and we obviously have visited Lake Ogled and Lake Bohim, which we enjoyed very much, and we've also visited Koran and the Adriatic coast. I think what we're enjoying most now in Slovenia, we have 2 small children, but we're exploring all the great hill walks and mountainside that there are around Ljubljana. So we've done a number of walks there, and so it's really nice how you can explore the beautiful hillside and mountainside that you have here in Slovenia, and you know, we really admire the way that you know, when you do a big long walk up the mountainside or a hill, you find a hut with food and drink, which I think is a really excellent idea. So I think that's what we're enjoying most here in Slovenia. But it is a very, very beautiful country, and I think sort of, as I say, a lot of similarities because we also have a lot of mountains in Ireland, and so for us the mountains and the sea are very important, I think also for people here in Slovenia.
Any other questions?
I have one. Do you speak Irish Gaelic, perhaps?
Well, not as well as I should, but we study it a lot in school, but no, I mean, the reality is that because of, for historical reasons, English became the widely spoken language over about the last 150 years, with Irish increasingly only spoken by quite a small proportion of the population. But it is still very important part of our identity, and there is a kind of a revival going on in Ireland. Very many children in Ireland now go to schools where they only speak Irish, where everything is taught through the Irish language. And those kind of schools are becoming very common and very popular in the major cities. So it is very much part of our identity, and something that Irish people are anxious to retain and to develop. It's a language which is still very much alive, in case there's any feeling that it isn't. But I suppose the reality is that increasingly in the world, English is a very widely spoken language, and can I compliment you all on the excellent English that you all have here. It's obviously very much the case in Slovenia that English is now very much the second language for most people.
Well, since you mentioned food before, what are some differences that you find in Slovenian cuisine? Was it hard to get used to it? Because I think the Irish cuisine is mostly based on, potatoes and lamb. So, some differences.
Well, no, we do like potatoes, but I think you like the potatoes here in Slovenia as well, crop here. So, no, I mean, there are differences, all right. Certainly, we've noticed there's a difference in kind of dairy products. I mean, because our milk and butter is something which I have to say we miss, and we like what you have here, but we miss the Irish butter and milk. But I think, certainly in Ireland, yes, traditionally potato is associated with Ireland, but the cuisine has developed quite a lot, and certainly there will be a lot more fish eaten now in Ireland. I mean, for many years, even though we're an island, fish wasn't that popular, but it's become really popular now, and I think the overall level of cuisine in Ireland has improved a great deal. So, but there are things, I mean, lamb is something that is very popular in Ireland, but it doesn't seem to be quite so popular here, so we wouldn't miss that. But certainly the cuisine here is wonderful, and we really enjoy the soups. I think it's something that you do very well here in Slovenia, and certainly I know my young son, at first he hated the soup, he wouldn't go near it, but now he's become a convert, and he comes home every day talking about the soup he had and how much he enjoyed it. So that's something that's proved very popular with our family anyway.
Thank you.
Another question. You said you have a lot of tourists every year. So how do you stop them from polluting your country?
Well, that's again a good question. As I say, we have over 7 million people who visit Ireland each year. There's no specific measures that we take. I mean, obviously, all that we would encourage is to promote awareness of the need to protect the environment, and that so certainly there will be many signs throughout the country just asking people not to leave litter and to take care of the environment. But there are no, as I say, no specific steps that we do. I mean, we would treat the tourists the same way as we expect our own citizens to behave. So basically, we just hope that people will make use of litter bins wherever they exist, and if they are out somewhere in the open or up a mountainside, that if they have food or some kind of items with them, that they will clear up when they finish and not leave any litter behind. So I suppose it's just general environmental awareness and expecting people to observe what we would regard as basic rules when you visit anywhere.
I have a question. In recent years, we learned about the fast economic growth of Ireland. My question is, how has the economic crisis affected the economic growth of Ireland?
Well, yes, we did. We had I suppose about 10-15 years ago, we were very much economically, we were doing very well. There were very high levels of growth in our economy. But then the economic crash, which affected pretty much all of the Western world, came in 2008. So we suffered quite a bit at that stage in terms of our economy. Just to give you one practical example, all public servants, such as myself, we've all had 3 salary reductions since the crash occurred. So 3 pay cuts basically, and none of them have been reversed so far. But we're coming through this period. We had to take very severe measures to try and restore our economy, to cut public expenditure, to raise taxes. But it does seem to be now having a very positive effect. So we're now at this stage, the overall level of growth, which is forecast for this year, is 4.5%. So we're now the fastest growing economy within the European Union. And certainly all the economic indicators are going in the right way. Unemployment is falling. And we're now beginning to get on top of the major public debt which we have in Ireland. But it's been a painful adjustment, but it does seem to be working, and hopefully the economic future for Ireland, as for Sevilla, is one which is going to only improve, hopefully, in the years to come.
Are there any other questions?
If someone decides to visit Ireland, which tourist attractions would you recommend to visit?
That's a tough one. Well, certainly, I mean, you probably will travel in the first instance to Dublin as the capital. I mean, Dublin is a very interesting city, very vibrant city. There's about 1.2 million people live in Dublin, so certainly Dublin is well worth visiting. A lot of historical sites, such as Trinity College, are worth visiting. But as I said, Ireland is possessed with great natural beauty, so what many people do is, once they visit Dublin, they then try to travel to the more scenic parts of Ireland, which would be basically in the west and the southwest of Ireland. So a very popular area in Ireland is a county called Kerry, which is perhaps the most scenic in Ireland, with the highest mountain peaks and many beautiful lakes and some fantastic beaches. So Kerry is somewhere that's always very popular, certainly with Irish people for holidays. And also counties like Galway. Galway is the major city in the west of Ireland, and it's a very hip place, kind of a lot of music, and it's a nice small city, but very interesting. And then there's also a county called Donegal in the northwest of Ireland, which again is very mountainous and has wonderful beaches, and so again very popular tourist destinations. But I think Ireland has many things to offer, so certainly if you're going to go, maybe give yourselves a good chance to explore the country and maybe try and go for a week or so, because certainly there's an awful lot to see.
If there are not any other questions, I'd like to thank you for your visit. It was very informative and interesting, and I hope that we'll see each other again.
Thank you very much, and it's been a real privilege to visit here today, so thank you again for inviting me, and good luck with all your studies, and I hope we'll see you at some stage, maybe in Ireland or maybe in Louisiana. But thank you again.